Hello and welcome to Redshirt Cinema Club, a weekly podcast about falling in love with Star Trek. This week, it's our first ever bonus episode. As we're about to boldly go into the Next Generation era, we thought it was only fair to give Rob a crash course in TNG's characters. And we finally had a delivery of your emails from those pesky tribbles. Is Rob a Picard fan yet? Honestly, no. Hello and welcome back to Redshirt Cinema Club. This is your captain speaking, David Jackson. I'm joined today, as always, by Lieutenant Nathan Dighton.
Oh, I've been demoted, I see.
You've had a field demotion, Nath. Yeah, you did a tweet I didn't like.
Right.
And I get to speak first on this podcast. And until further notice, you've been demoted. But I will take note of how you do in this podcast before the next one. And I can't do it. I'm sorry, civilian observer Rob Pearson.
I don't believe it.
I need to consult with my lieutenant before
I thought you were going to say cadet, I'm going to be honest.
What, for Rob Pearson?
Yeah.
Really?
But not yet.
Not yet. Well, we need to talk outside of this podcast before we... it'll be a big deal when you're promoted. I just want you to take that very seriously. Welcome, everybody, to the first ever bonus episode, or just other episode.
Oh, well, I was going to say we should have called it an away mission.
Oh, that's good.
And we didn't.
It's not too late. We still could. Edit this bit out. Our first ever away mission on the Redshirt Cinema Club, which, Nath, it's a bit of a brainchild of yours. The one thing that we haven't done, which I'm very keen to do, is to rank films 1 to 6, which we are going to be doing. But what else are we going to be doing in this episode?
Well, we talked about the fact that we got to the end of those original cast movies and we hadn't done like a full ranking. And there's a reason for that, because there is a kind of a crossover period or movie. But the other things that we wanted to do, really, in thinking about the next generation, Rob, this is for you. I realised that is the Star Trek that I'm like a massive... I like the old movies, but I watched a couple of episodes of the Next Generation to prepare for those movies, and I've watched now nearly a dozen of them. I just keep watching them. I love them. I watch the intro every time. I love them, and we'll get more into that. So anyway, I didn't want to have what we had before, which was you going in cold to those. I just cannot stand that idea. So there's some.
You will like these.
So there's some prep for the Next Generation. Some interesting context, especially for the first all Next Generation movie. There's a couple of things you just need to.
Don't say too much.
No, and then there's mailbag. So it is ranking, context, mailbag.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
I mean, we have said this many times, Rob. Ostensibly, this podcast is to see if the films can make you into a Star Trek fan. But really, what would make you into a Star Trek fan is not the films, I think.
Yeah.
But that wouldn't be as good a podcast. Right. So this is what we've decided to do. So we should get going then and start off. We've just finished watching films 1 to 6. It's been a ride. But we haven't talked about them in the context of films 1 to 6. So through some very simple questions, I think we're going to get a sense of how everybody feels about each movie. Obviously, we will end with your rankings, where everybody knows this, but I want to start with just some more kind of straightforward questions. Starting with you first then, Rob. Have you got a favourite character or actor from the series of 6 movies?
I think I do, and this is surprising to me, especially after episode 1.
Yep.
I think it has to be Kirk and William Shatner.
Wow.
You can say it.
I'm not saying I like him, but he has a character.
Yeah.
He is so human. And obviously he is supposed to be the representation of humanity in this far-flung future world. And often he is compared with the Vulcan stoicism of Spock. But he's so flawed and so aware of his flaws. And he's so charismatic. And I think the reason I didn't like him after the first film probably had more to do with that film's failings in terms of giving an accurate portrayal of his character on screen. I think the subsequent films that I've seen him in, I feel like I know Kirk as a character now. And I feel like he and William Shatner, probably having learned a little bit about the man William Shatner through what you've told me, Nath, there's definite crossover between the character and the actor who portrays him, and I think he does a great job. His scene at the end of Wrath of Khan where he ejects Spock out into space. Mm-hmm. You can feel that it isn't just Kirk with a lump in his throat there. it feels like William Shatner also describing his friend Leonard Nimoy as much as it is Shatner describing his friend Spock. And so for that reason, it's Kirk and William Shatner for me.
Yeah, quite boringly, I would say the same thing. I have come with a second option for outside of the main three, because I did think this might happen. But I will just say I do think Kirk is an excellent character, an excellent captain as well. I think that he toes that line brilliantly between being decisive and sort of single-minded, and well, he's never actually single-minded, but being that decisive presence you need, but also he very much relies on his crew and listens to them, knows when to give and when to take. I think he's excellent, and I do think, that Venn diagram of Shatner to Kirk is probably quite close to a circle, but I think Kirk's got fewer of Shatner's dislikable qualities, actually. It's like an improved 100%. Version. But if I had to pick outside of the main three, my character, I don't know, and maybe I haven't given this enough thought, but I felt this was right, is Scotty.
I would probably say outside the main three, Scotty as well.
I think he's the most consistent of all the extended cast across the movies. He's got consistently the worst accent. Actually, is that true? Chekhov's accent's pretty bad sometimes. But he's got consistently, I think, his character's extremely consistent. He's warm. He's very funny, I think. And he would be my pick.
You know what you're getting with Scotty? He's just the guy who makes stuff work.
Yeah.
And there's always a gag you can do with the guy who makes stuff work in every movie.
Yeah. Exactly.
Having written these questions, I actually now feel like they're a bit of a trap, aren't they? Because like you said, it has to be, really, there isn't that much screen time for anyone who isn't in the main three.
No.
I think they really dropped the ball on Spock in a couple of movies, and Bones is never going to be anyone's favourite.
I did consider Bones. I really like him. I also thought about Rob kind of complaining about him a lot and thinking like, he doesn't do... He's not really a doctor ever.
He's not in it enough.
But I do really like his character. I think, he does have some standout moments, like in Final Frontier when he kind of is reliving that horror of his dad's death. I think he's an excellent actor. He's, again, very funny. I love his relationship with Spock especially. But, he's not going to be my favourite character.
Because I would say my favourite character is Spock, but I don't think he's given enough to do in the movie. So, like... No.
Well, for the most part of like 2 whole movies, he's not true Spock, is he?
Yeah, exactly. But Voyage Home Spock is amazing.
Yeah.
And
peak Spock.
Undiscovered Country Spock gets loads to do. He's running the ship. So on that basis, Spock, that's my answer.
Yeah.
Having said that he doesn't get enough to do.
We like Spock, Kirk and Bones on this podcast.
It is.
And ready salted crisps.
Just so everyone's aware, no one would have even considered a villain because everybody knew my next question was going to be favourite villain of the series. And I will be interested in this one. This could be divisive.
This is a really up and down question.
Why don't we start with you, Nath, on favourite villain? And there's only really 3 to choose from, right? I guess we can only really consider Chang, Khan, and Christopher Lloyd.
What about Sarbok?
Yeah, Sybok. Who was way better than I thought.
Is Sybok a villain, though?
I would class him as a villain.
Yeah, he starts a revolution and he captures everybody. So, he's a...
Who are you saying? I didn't even consider him, and it's interesting that I wouldn't consider him a villain. I considered him a kind of... I accept that he's, he starts with some bad stuff.
See, I think they all do such different things. So I'm going to talk it through like the board on Pointless. I think Khan is the best classic original series style villain when the movies are still quite serious. I think Chang, like Plumber, is just... when it's moving more towards self-parody, he's so much fun. And I like Sybok because that actor was from nowhere, and he's kind of one of those, oh no, I'm not a bad guy, I'm just deluded. Like, it's a slightly different tone.
Yeah. He does come good at the end.
For me, I think the performance I straight up and down enjoyed the most is Plummer as Chang. And then, who else would come back for a PC game? It seals it for me.
Well, let's do me second to mix it up then. I found this very difficult. I think had you asked me before we'd watched The Undiscovered Country, I would have said Chang. Mm. I think that everybody poked a lot of holes in his quoting Shakespeare, which I have traditionally loved, and I've given it a second thought, and I'm not so sure anymore. But I'm very happy to go with Khan. Honestly, I love Khan, even after Rob's correct kind of character assassination about him being actually quite rubbish. I love, maybe it's Ricardo Montalban that I love. I think his performance is excellent, and he does bring something. I mean, it must be great because all these years I've thought Khan was a fascinating, cool character, and didn't see any of his shortcomings that Rob quite quickly pointed out to me.
And as we all know, he quotes Moby Dick, as we've always known.
That's the best quoting that goes on, I think.
Yes, we were always very clear. It is good. It is good. Maybe it's Nicholas Meyer who's actually the best, our favourite villain. Rob, who are you going to pick as your favourite villain?
Oh, this is a difficult question for me because I don't think that any of them are particularly great villains. So I guess I'll just have to go with... It's definitely not Christopher Lloyd. He's bottom.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's my least favourite.
Get out!
And I think...
He's bad. Thinking back to that fight that he has with Khan, with Kirk at the end. It's terrible, isn't it?
I've had enough of you.
I think in terms of the one who sort of scared me the most, I think it would have to be Cybok.
Oh,
really?
Just how he has quite a lot of the crew enthralled, doesn't he? He has this incredible psychic power almost.
Yeah.
He's like a religious cult leader, charismatic, fanatical.
He's a populist.
Yes, and
how relevant.
At the end, I quite enjoyed that he had enough about him to realise the errors of his ways right at the end, and try to redeem himself. I thought he was I don't think he's an amazing villain.
He's the most three-dimensional.
But he felt like a real character to me, and I thought he was the most interesting character of all. I thought Khan was a pantomime villain, and Chang was as well.
Yeah, I think that's
he
fair.
was like seaside pantomime.
I really want there to be just a horrible, unknowable cosmic space villain. That's what I'm waiting for.
Well, you could have the cigar-shaped object from space.
The cigar-shaped object wasn't really a villain, though, was it? Just wanted to make sure the whales were okay.
It's quite nice.
Yeah, but by destroying everything in its path.
Yeah, it's like a big dog that comes bounding into a room and accidentally knocks everyone's toys over. Just like, oh!
Yeah.
It's not a villain.
I'm going to have to push you for an answer on favourite villain.
Cybok.
Okay. Cybok. Yeah, you've pushed me. Fine, Cybok. That's interesting. Yeah, interesting. I wouldn't even consider Cybok as a villain, but I completely agree. Definitely the most rounded character as well. Favourite scene, then. Let's do me first to mix it up. I found this really difficult. Again, I think there are some excellent scenes. But the one I think that has stayed with me the longest and will stay with me the longest is going to be Spock's death in Wrath of Khan.
Yeah.
I think it's brilliantly done. I love the moment I love it right from Kirk has just kind of like, they've just escaped, that sigh of relief. And I think it's, Scotty, maybe it's like, you better get down here. Or maybe it's Bones actually. Yeah. No, it's whoever it is. Anyway, you better get down. And he looks across at the empty seat and instantly he realizes what's happened.
Yeah. Even
though he doesn't know. And then the chat they have in the engine room, I think is just fantastic. I love that parting shot of them sat back to back, Kirk looking so forlorn, Spock is dying. It's actually brilliant. I think really, really good. So that's my favourite scene. Let's talk to you, Nath, about your favourite scene.
I think I'm going to name two. The one I almost mentioned was Bones in one of the less good films, in his kind of Cybok induced flashback.
Yeah,
you're never sure whether it's everyone's seeing it or whether it's internal, but where he is reliving having helped his father to pass away and then them having developed a cure. Now I say it's quite a cheap idea, isn't it? Developing a cure as soon as he's euthanized his own father. But it gave DeForest Kelley something to do which he doesn't normally do. He's normally like the coper.
Yeah.
And he's very wry. He's got like a very particularly American mid-century sense of we're going to ride this out and we're going to be okay. And I think obviously that's it's part of his kind of medical persona as well. in that he's seeing all of this grim stuff and he's getting through it, and it really breaks through all of that, and something like this really emotional moment, and it's as close as that movie gets to being actually good instead of just interesting, and it's really unusual from him. So it was either that or one of the comic scenes, and I probably would have chosen. So I'm laughing at the image of Spock in his pants swimming with whales, but the scene I was actually we talked about it a bunch, but Hello Computer, you just can't get past. Hello Computer.
Hello Computer.
Such good.
Scotty again.
So I've chosen two there.
I thought, well, in that case, I want to, for my favourite comedy scene, I want to say in the van, Do You Like Italian Food?
Yeah.
That is just an excellent scene. But Rob, your favourite scene?
Well, I was sort of going to cheat and say I have a favourite sequence, which is
you can say
in the journey home where they go back in time and they arrive in 1980 San Francisco for the first time. I just thought everything around that was just very funny, and I felt like I learned more about this crew of space explorers when they were in 1980 San Francisco than I did when they were on the crew of their actual spaceship. Yeah. I just really enjoyed that. The script was funny and witty.
So good.
So many standout moments. When they're selling I can't remember what he sells, but he gets $100 for it.
It's his antique specs, isn't it?
Yeah, he's just dividing out the $100.
He goes,
no idea. He has no idea if it's a lot of money or not.
Even the guy's like, it's not bad. I could probably do better.
What stayed with me, and I was thinking about it, I think when I was bringing my dog for walk yesterday, is the line, I am from Iowa. I only work in outer space.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
If I had to pick a favourite scene from that topic, though, I would think the Mission Impossible breaking Chekhov out of hospital scene would go down as my favourite.
Yeah. In my head, it is the Home Alone music whilst that's happening. It's like,
And Bones gets his moment to shine there as well.
He does.
I knew as soon as he met that little lady, I was like, when they're escaping, she's going to be there. Like, yeah, I'm fine now.
It's so weird that you have that music, and it must be something to do with the way that brains work in general, because the music I've got is Ghostbusters when they get their first call, and it's all that piano music.
Oh yeah.
That's it for me.
Yeah, similar vibes. Okay, right. The last thing we need to do then, it's a big one actually. I think this is a big thing, and people will want to know our rankings of the films. And Rob, I think it makes sense to go last with you, because I think people will be most interested in that and will learn the most. So we'll start with you and I, Nath, ranking the films. I'm going to rank them in
reverse order.
Yeah. And why not? I'll go first. I've written them down.
Yeah.
Cut that bit. Are we gonna like deploy a scoring system here and come out with the Redshirt Cinema Club's definitive ranking of the first 6 Star Trek films after this?
Word. Yeah, let's do it, but we may need to edit that bit while we do the maths.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Rob, can you note down ours as we go, because you've got a pen?
Yeah.
Okay, so my ranking, starting with the worst film, or my least favourite film.
Yeah. The least brilliant.
Would go as follows. 1, 3.
Oh, you've gone fast. Sorry.
5.
Wait, it's.
That's
so
right.
I thought you were saying 1, as in number, but you mean motion picture.
I'm just saying them. Yeah, I can say them in a different way if you'd like.
No, that's okay.
The least favourite was the motion picture.
Okay.
My second least favourite was Search for Spock.
Okay.
My third least favourite was Final Frontier.
Yeah.
My third favourite was The Voyage Home.
Ah.
My second favourite was Undiscovered Country, and my favourite was The Wrath of Khan.
Wow, that's incredibly close to mine.
I think that if you had asked me this question before, just based on my previous experience of watching these movies, I think The Voyage Home would have been further down the rankings.
Yeah.
And I would have been unsure about 1, 3, and 5. But I felt, before we did this, I felt that I didn't really like The Voyage Home that much. Right. It certainly wouldn't have been my third place. But
just go through those last 3 again then. So the ones basically where you're actually enjoying the film.
So in third place, The VoyageOme.
Right.
In second place, The Undiscovered Country. Yeah. And in first place, The Wrath of Khan.
So we'll get into this in a minute, but there is like a classic sort of model of ranking these, which I'm not sure we've spoken to Rob about. And there's a couple of questions about it, so I don't want to preempt them.
No.
And I will say that I was kind of trying to break out of that in my ranking, but I didn't.
Right.
So my first 3 are exactly the same as yours. The motion picture is What's interesting is it's not going to be for Rob, but
No.
that is my least favourite. I just didn't have a very good time watching that film.
I just thought about watching it again, and I thought that's the one I'd least like to watch again.
Do you know the interesting thing here is that I rewatched about 10 minutes of it the other day for a reason, and instantly, having watched the 6 so far, I was having a different reaction again.
Right.
And I can't remember what podcast it is. There's a podcast where they just watch the same film every week.
Right.
I was kind of thinking,
What do you think of it today?
and it becomes like an art idea. But I was thinking we could rewatch the movies now, and Rob would have a different opinion on
I think
all of them.
I definitely think that's true. Yeah.
Maybe we should do at some point. So yeah, 1, 3, and 3 was almost the worst. The screaming, the screams,
Yeah.
the ponfar. 5.
Yeah.
Although I like 5. That's where I start to enjoy the films more.
That was a surprise for me too. I enjoyed 5 this time. I know I said it was my third least favourite, but it was also my fourth favourite.
And then Undiscovered Country, number 6 for me,
yeah.
which is a really good film actually. And it's probably a tie between that and Khan, which I've put at second place. Khan, I've never enjoyed watching. It's just obviously a good film. I don't know. Like I'm scarred from it as a child. I hated watching Spock die. I hated the controlling SETI eels. But yeah, it's a great film, and the death of Spock is a great moment. And just because it was the most fun when we watched it all together, I've got Voyage Home as number 1.
It was a lot of fun.
It works. It bangs.
Yeah.
It's got that momentum.
This is interesting. I think this is very interesting already. But it's going to be much more interesting after we turn to civilian observer Robert Pearson.
Hello.
To hear his ranking of the movies.
Yes.
Rob, would you do us the honour, starting with your least favourite?
In 6th place, I've gone with Star Trek V, The Final Frontier.
Wow.
But with your favourite villain. Doesn't say a lot about the other villains.
In 5th place, Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock.
Very
Yeah.
interesting.
I think we all agreed on that as fifth place.
Getting a kicking.
In 4th place, Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan.
Ouch.
In 3rd place, Star Trek The Motion Picture.
Wow.
I'm surprised.
In 2nd place, Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country.
Okay.
Wow, great.
And my favourite, Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home.
Interesting.
Very interesting. Well, you guys have agreed about the voyage home.
What a great time.
That is interesting. I'm surprised. I thought, has that surprised you going through that exercise, Rob, at all? I guess maybe that's a bit of a weird question, but I definitely felt like, to begin with, maybe for a while, you thought that the motion picture was going to be one of your most favourite movies, but then Undiscovered Country's come through at the end there, and Voyage Home.
Well, Voyage Home is just a fun... It's just a fun time.
Yeah.
There's by far the most fun I had watching a Star Trek movie.
Yeah.
Even though I don't think it is the best movie. I think The Undiscovered Country is the most accomplished film here. If I'm saying what's the best film, it's probably The Undiscovered Country.
I think that's
but
true.
Voyage Home would be my favourite.
Should we do some maths? So we've mathed,
mathed.
and Rob, you can now deliver to us the official Redshirt Cinema Club ranking.
I can. So, in 6th place, it's Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock.
Good.
Yeah.
Get into a volcano.
A volcano?
Well, it's kind of there's lava.
But you said, but that's a volcano. I thought you were making a Vulcan joke.
Oh,
a volcano.
I see what you're saying.
And that had 6 points in my calculations.
Yeah.
Also with 6 points, it goes above The Search for Spock just because it received the highest placing in an individual ranking. It's Star Trek The Motion Picture.
This is like the Champions League draw.
Who were England going to face in the last 16? Basically? Essentially, if it wasn't for me liking the motion picture so much, it would definitely
be down there, yeah.
In 4th place with 7 points, so just scraping into 4th, Star Trek V, The Final Frontier.
Yeah. That's where I had it.
In 3rd place, Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country, with 14 points.
Interesting.
Also with 14 points. In 2nd place, it's Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan.
So level.
Which goes above The Undiscovered Country on account of it receiving the best individual placing in Dave's list. And then with 16 points, our favourite Star Trek movie, officially Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home.
Yeah, I have no problem with any of that, really. Like, even though it's not completely the same as my original ranking, it's basically right. And they are a little bit interchangeable in some ways. I've got a lot of fondness for those top three, especially. I think they're all great.
Having gone through and been reading William Shatner's book the whole time, and he makes out like he's not sad and he doesn't need anybody to say that his movie's good, but he obviously was a bit sad at the time, especially. And I think interesting. I mean, what does he care what we think, right? But isn't it interesting that we're ranking his movie above Nimoy's first movie? Obviously, Nimoy's second movie is top of the list.
Yeah, but Kirk didn't get a second go, or Shatner didn't get a second go, I should say. Got to stop thinking of them as the same person. It is interesting.
Well, there we go. That's good. Well, that's a problem sorted out. Trek fans can stop talking about that now.
Yeah, we've done it. We've done it scientifically as well.
Yeah.
Very scientific. That's good. Well, that feels like a big kind of underlining of reaching the end of those first 6 movies, a rite of passage that we have to do.
I'm so excited about what's next.
Yeah, and what does come next is us prepping you, Rob, for the Next Generation cast and crew, if not the series itself.
You're either going to love or hate how we've done this.
Okay.
Yeah, and what do you want to talk about that, Nath? Because
Well,
this is a bit more your brainchild.
In a nod to our existing body of work, Rob, we've put together 5 things you'll love about Star Trek The Next Generation.
Excellent. Number 1, the graphics.
Well, the graphics are improved.
Good.
Yeah, they
from
are.
the original
really
series. They are improved.
Oh, well, you wait until number. Shall I just crack on?
Yeah, go for
Let's
it.
do it like it's like we are doing that. Okay, cool. Well, number 1, Rob, but it's also number 2 in the way that we sometimes fudge these lists, is amazing alien races. So they brought in several alien races specifically to jig things up a little bit for The Next Generation. But knowing your love of highfalutin sci-fi concepts, there are a couple particular of alien races introduced by The Next Generation that I think you're going to really get on board with. And actually, I would encourage you to watch just 3 specific episodes before we start watching the movies. First of all, an alien race called the Q. And they are individually called Q and collectively called Q.
Yes.
In a way which I think you'd enjoy.
Like sheep.
They'd hate that.
And like sheep, they are an extra-dimensional race with seemingly omnipotent powers over space and time. The main specific Q that we see has a kind of a puckish mischief to him. He's like a Pan figure. He kind of drops in, he wears a ridiculous outfit, and he puts the entire human race on trial for the crimes that they've committed ever, and he focuses it on Picard specifically, Captain Jean-Luc Picard. And he is capable of moving through time. He can just instantly teleport people into other places. At one point, which we'll talk about in a sec, he whooshes the Enterprise hundreds of light years away into a distant galaxy. I think you'll like Q a lot, and he is appears as a regular human man. Number 2 is another alien race, Dave.
Yes, I just want to say on Q as well. I think Q is it's what's great about Q is his fascination with the human race, and it's a great format or thing to be able to hold ourselves up and answer questions about what it is to be human in that same way that kind of Spock was that, like a constant reference point for what is it to be human. Q is fascinated with humanity, and in Picard he's met probably one of the best humans ever, and they have an interesting relationship, which is really fun and really interesting, and they're such a cool species. You find out a lot more about them over not just the Next Generation, but they are then kind of prevalent in later series as well. But when Q sends the Enterprise off into these hundreds or thousands of light years away, it's kind of to punish them because Picard is saying, look how far we've come. We're this kind of like amazing species now. We're very enlightened. We've done away with all this bad stuff. We will approach anything. We think we can go out there and explore the galaxy, and we can approach anything with this sense of humanity that will see us right in the end. And Q's like, well,
it is kind of like that. I just want to say that what happens is Q wants to join the Enterprise crew.
So sorry, this race, they're called the Q collectively.
Yeah.
Individually, they're called Q.
Yes.
And this person is named Q as well.
Correct. correct.
Yeah.
Right.
And also there are some complications behind it. But he turns up, he's wearing a Starfleet uniform. He says, I want to join your crew. And Picard says, of course you can't join the crew. And then he looks like he's joking, and then he gets really mad, and then he flings them into a different galaxy.
Yes, to teach them a lesson. And the lesson is that you're not ready. And his way of teaching them that is by introducing this new species called the Borg.
The Borg.
Have you ever heard
I've
of
heard
the Borg?
of the Borg. Yes.
Borg.
The Borg are arguably the most kind of, I don't know, terrifying, interesting. They're like, and as a Star Trek thing, they're probably the most recognizable thing, I think.
They define the next generation.
They really do define the next generation, and they're very prevalent after that as well. It's just
Right.
an incredible creation. They're like this collective of cybernetic beings, obviously Borg coming from cyborg, and they're connected by a hive mind to seek and assimilate all living organisms. So they're kind of like, their thing is just adding things to the collective. They have this saying, I think, which is like your unique and something qualities
Your
will be,
uniqueness will be added to our own.
which obviously no one wants. I like keeping my uniqueness to myself, but they're like, you're joining the Borg, come on. And they inject you with nanoprobes that turn you into a cyborg, and your consciousness becomes part of the collective, and all the Borg think as one.
Wow. They
And
sound like communism.
They are a bit like communism. They kind of
They also sound like the Daleks a little bit.
well, that's also not completely wrong. And they
But a little bit wrong.
But this is what you think about. This is like 1990, and just that moment where the wall is coming down. So the fear of socialism is still there, obviously massively prevalent in the original series. But we're also beginning to worry more about technology and what's coming, and the kind of storytelling that then later on you'll get with the Matrix. So it's kind of this nexus of, we still don't really like collectivism, but also look at what technology might do to us in the future. You end up with the Borg. And the storytelling that comes from it's fantastic.
I found them completely terrifying.
They
as
sound
a child.
cool.
It's very cool. They're very interesting. They are, monotonous, like a never-ending force. They've got incredible technology. But the thing I think is most terrifying, I was always terrified of the idea of being assimilated. First of all,
Because you're such a rebel, though.
first of all, the pain of it, but also the thing I think that is most horrible for me is, if you were facing an enemy that just wants to kill you, the enemy gets you don't want to be killed, but it's like not about that. Whereas this enemy, they're not killing you. They're changing you and making part of you, and they don't a part of them, and they don't even think of it. They don't really have the concept of why you wouldn't want this. It's sort of like,
You don't know where they've come from. You don't know who started the Borg. You don't know any of these things.
No.
They're just this, and their spaceship is just a massive cube.
Right.
It's brilliant,
It's brilliant design.
and it regenerates itself.
there's so many. We could bang on about the Borg.
They sound more like the
All day.
Cybermen than the Daleks, actually.
Yes, yeah, correct.
I don't get any of those. I don't get any of those references.
Number 3. Well, I'm going to move on to specific things that are brilliant about the cast, and number 3 is just Jean-Luc Picard. I love him. I love him so much. I've been watching, like I said, a few episodes, and you just realise how much of an influence television can have on you. I watched all these from the ages of about 10 to about 15, and I clearly think loads of things which Jean-Luc Picard has just told me when I was a child, which I just, this is correct. But his model, so he is, do you remember your first impression of Kirk? And you kind of thought that he was a kind of a stern, authoritative, not like a rule breaker. Picard is kind of like your initial impression of Kirk.
Okay.
And not that there's no leeway or humanity there, but he is principled and moral, and despite being French and his character is French, he's obviously incredibly English just because Patrick Stewart is incredibly English, but he also does I think he does embody a sort of an idealized form of English leadership where he's compassionate but firm. He's he's much more of a patrician figure to the rest of the crew, and Stewart pulls out this performance. The performances in The Next Generation are, on the whole, I would say, a long way ahead of the performances, especially in the original series. And he's great. And I've got the best 3 Picard moments. I've got a list feature within this list feature. I kind of hate this because it's just lobbing massive spoilers at you, but here we go. The first time we meet the Borg properly, Picard is assimilated by the Borg, and he becomes a figurehead of theirs called Locutus, because they're about to go and invade Earth and they want a human spokesperson. And there's this 2-episode arc where a tiny part of his mind is able to resist, and then he's brought back and they're able to undo it. But seeing Picard go through that is important. I'm not just telling you because it's one of my favourite moments, because it may be important when we come to the films.
I am Locutus of Borg. Resistance is futile. Your life, as it has been, is over. From this time forward, you will service us.
Number 2, just as they launched Deep Space Nine being the second new era series, which was going to be taking place between 2 planets which had been fighting forever, basically a sort of nasty militaristic group of people called the Cardassians and the Bajorans, who are more like
religious, spiritual.
Yes. Not underdogs, but like a less.
But they're having to fight. They've been invaded, and they're having to fight a kind of rebellion, a sort of very makeshift. They don't have a lot of resource or technology.
Avoiding using any real world analogies for obvious reasons.
Exactly.
But, and to launch that, they had an episode where Picard was captured on an espionage mission by the Cardassians, and then over 2 episodes they had a 1984 inspired torture sequence where David Warner,
I was going to say, was it David Warner?
It was David Warner.
Amazing.
Comes back as his Cardassian torturer, and has
he's a third character.
Yeah, 3 massive characters in the Star
he's
universe.
So you remember the end of 1984 where Winston is being tortured by O'Brien, and he says, "What's 2 + 2?" And he wants him to say 5. And I think the line is, sometimes it's 5, sometimes it's 4, sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's all at once. And what does he say? There's a lot. It takes a lot of work to be sane. Anyway, there's a sequence where there are 4 lights, and Picard's tortured and starved and beaten, and all he has to say is that there are 5 lights. And he won't say it. And there's this scene which I think everyone who watched this as a teenager will just remember. Picard, and he's got bruises on him, and he looks terrible, just kind of screaming in defiance, "There are 4 lights. There are 4 lights.
There are 4 lights!"
And what's your third best moment, Picard moment?
The third best Picard moment is one which I'm going to get up and I'm going to show to Rob. This is something that Dave and I actually say to each other.
Well, I was going to say, Rob, I don't know if you've ever seen on Twitter. I used to follow this. There's a. I mean, why would you have seen it? There's a profile, or used to be called Picard Management Tips. And it's basically Picard. I think it's Picard quotes, or it might not even be Picard quotes, but and I thought it was kind of a joke account, but then I started following it, and I actually just thought this is actually really useful. And and I just want to say on Picard as well, whilst Nath's finding this, to show you I think that you'll like him a lot, and one of the reasons I think you'll like him a lot is that he doesn't suffer fools. He's quite often exasperated by stupidity around him, and is quite happy to sort of express that. But he's also warm and well respected, and he does, he's cares. He's not inhuman at all. It's very, very well written character and very well performed.
We're actually going to move on to Data in a second. He's number 4. And this is a scene between Picard and Data, which explains why their relationship is the key one. Data is a bit like Spock. He's learning about how to be human. He's an android character. And this is a scene where Picard has asked him to be his first officer because Commander Riker is off the Enterprise for a bit. And as often happens, Data is kind of saying, well, the logical choice is not me. And there are some problems that I'm facing, and I'm not ready. And this is the scene.
Commander, I require your presence on the bridge.
Captain, with all due respect, perhaps it would be better if you choose another to serve as your first officer.
Data, you were my first officer.
I have not been able to isolate the problem, sir. I might make a mistake.
Yes, you might. But that does not alter your duty to me and to this ship. Now, do you know how to formulate a premise?
Yes, sir.
Then formulate this one. How do I deal with Commander Riker and the Hathaway? I will await your answer on the bridge. And Commander, it is possible to commit no mistakes and still lose. That is not a weakness. That is life.
What a human guy.
Which one?
Oh, it's so good. I've honestly got goosebumps. I love that so much. That is life.
Yeah.
Come on.
Life. That's
I love
such a
this
good
kind
life
of- I
lesson.
love the wisdom of those kind of quotes because they make you feel like, yes.
Yeah.
It's almost
true.
like Gandalf-like.
Yeah.
That is not for them to decide.
Oh, and it is a bit like that. And I would say, before we move on to Data, I would just want to say that I feel like the reason I love TNG is it's a group of writers who kind of knew what Star Trek was from the original go round. And once they spun up the series and it was working, it is just full of like ethical, moral quandaries and problems. There's loads of like, trolley problem. Basically, every other week is like, oh, but that would mean this. What do we do? And then they just have to figure it out.
That I mean, that in particular, we have spoken about many, many times. That it is possible to do everything right and still lose.
That's why we lose.
That's so good. Oh God, it's really, really good. And also, I wonder if you would notice there, he is a little bit abrasive.
Yeah.
And still really respected, really likable. He's not mean. He's like the right kind of mean. Not even mean, just serious and just to the point. And he speaks
feels like
firm is the word.
He's encouraging Data.
Yes,
Here.
exactly. Encourage. It's extremely inspirational. I wish
the
he
word,
was. I wish he was my boss. Honestly, I feel like I'd be the 10 times better than I am at anything I do if Picard was my boss.
He would also just get rid of you if you were rubbish. You're going to talk to us about Data?
Yes, well, you've
Number 4.
You've now obviously seen a little bit of Data in that episode extract, and Data he's kind of the secret weapon of the show, I guess, because he's got that similarity to Spock again. He's a not human android who's been built by a human in the image of humans, and he is fascinated again with humanity, and he is at least as far as he knows unique. He's the only one of his species. His creator is disappeared or dead. He doesn't really know, so he has just endless questions about his place in the universe and what it is to be human. Even though he's not human, he wonders whether he might like to be human, but he's interested in it. He's obviously incredibly intelligent. He has incredible like dexterity and stuff. He can perform superhuman feats, and he really struggles with basic human stuff in a really lovely way, more than Spock, I would say, like humor.
Well, there's one scene which I actually haven't gone back to watch, but which I'm not put it on this script, but I remember clearly from my first watch through, which is where Geordie, who is his one friend, like his proper friend,
That's really got me for some reason. It's so true.
He comes in and he kind of says, "You Data, what are you doing?" And he's watching a kettle boil, and he's timing it, and he says, "People say that a watched pot boils slower, but I've done loads of tests and it boils the same." And then Geordie has to explain that it's not. So that kind of naivety is really key to the character.
He's really, really great character, and again, just a fantastic device for the show to look at humanity, but also and morals and
boundaries,
all kinds of things.
Boundaries. But there's like an episode in the second season where the new Doctor calls him Data. And he just says, "It's Data." And then she says, "What's the difference?" And he just turns around and says, "It is my name."
Well, this is the other thing, is there's an interesting, it's a great way as well as looking at the human characters, some of whom see him as a unique being, some of whom just see him as a machine who should be taken apart, because he would be, imagine having if we could make more of these, we could have ships just running with these, machines. It'd be great. And that's another big part of the series is Data a life form?
And just to wrap it up, because I can see on your face you've heard enough about Data, but he's
And
got
maybe all of these characters.
He's got a cat called Spot that he loves. He has an evil, charismatic twin brother called Law, and
Who Data does?
yes,
Yeah.
there's another because they
just said he was a unique
Well, I know
being.
I wasn't revealing that to
Well,
you.
they discover him later, and they're like, "Oh my god, look, it's Data!" But he's like got emotions,
You
and
were
he's
like
doing
this.
all weird.
He's got the emotions chip.
Nice.
Oh, so
excellent.
it's brilliant. Number 5. It's just the rest of the cast and crew
Yeah.
because they are also amazing. We're going to go through these very quickly. Number 2, second in command. Number 1 is William Riker, whose character was taken very directly from Decker, which would have been a Phase 2 character. And Decker is obviously the captain right at the beginning of the motion picture. He is more like Kirk. He is sort of dashing. He gets on chairs backwards. It's called the Riker maneuver. He spins the chair
Is
around.
he the guy in the memes who sort of like has that pose where he puts his leg up?
Yeah.
Is that
yeah,
him?
that's
Oh,
the
yeah,
guy. Yeah,
that's
yeah.
right.
And he does. Jonathan Frakes is the actor, and he does. Was it Ripley's Believe It or Not? Is that
Yes,
the,
I think it is, yeah.
And so you might have seen memes of him just saying, "No way, it's not true."
Nope.
Yeah. Anyway, he's fantastic. He's very loyal to Picard, but he's more emotional and that kind of dynamic. And he's very charming.
He is charming. He very much is a bit more of a playboy, shall we say? He likes to try his luck with the ladies.
He does.
He's
At
not
one
shy
point,
about
there's
that.
a women-only planet. It was incredibly successful, and they're all really, really smart. And he gets sent to the planet, and they go nuts for him. Dave, tell us about.
He wrote that one, I think.
Tell us about Worf.
Worf is, of course, Michael Dorn, who you've already met in Undiscovered Country.
Of course, I forgot how rubbish that
Rob
was.
forgot Worf existed. He's the guy going, objection! In the Undiscovered Country. And Worf is the security officer of the Enterprise. He's a Klingon.
He's a Klingon
On the bridge.
What's he doing on the bridge?
Which is, kind of like a massive statement of what has happened since the Undiscovered Country, that now there are Klingons serving in Starfleet. I think actually just one, and I think it's Worf. He's an amazing, and we've talked a lot about the Klingons in the first 6 films and how, and that you're like, I don't really get what the Klingons are, and I feel like the Next Generation really did decide and define what the Klingons were, and Worf is a big part of that, and so he's so honourable, and he does battle with his Klingon nature and the what it means to be Klingon, but within the Federation, which is much more, has more kind of rules, and there's less. I don't know. It's hard to say really, but I feel like he's constantly battling his Klingon heritage versus this role he's chosen to do, and he's, I think, kind of universally almost hated by Klingons because they see him as sort of like a traitor, really, and a coward. Oh, that's right. They think he's a coward because he's gone to the Federation, and a coward is the worst thing you could be.
There's a whole arc about him interceding in the Klingon Civil War, which you might want to check out, Rob.
Nathan, tell us about Geordie,
okay.
who made me do a big laugh when you mentioned him a minute ago.
Geordie LaForge, when I was trying to write this little character bio, he's like an engineer, so he's the new Scotty, and there is an episode where he meets Scotty, because we were talking about teleporters before. Scotty deliberately, as a last-ditch effort to stay alive, puts himself in a teleportation buffer. So he's just like pinging around in a buffer for 70 years, gets then materialized by the Enterprise, and he's like fish out of water. These are all different in my day. Has nothing to do, and he meets Geordie LaForge and they have a lovely episode. But Geordie is just nice. That's kind of it. His whole deal is he's really good at his job, which I think, horrible to say, but in the 80s, seeing a young black guy be just incredibly good at their job was maybe more radical than it is now. He's, again, very loyal, but he's just good. There isn't like, Scotty's got a bit of a Scottish character. Oh, he's got the visor. That's.
He's blind, yeah. So he has an electronic device so that he can see. Although he doesn't see like we see, he sees kind of like electromagnetic something or other.
I love Geordie. I think he's brilliant.
Do you think I'm Geordie?
I was gonna say, but because there's a question about which characters we are, and my answer was going to be like, Dave, come now.
Geordie, I wouldn't choose to be Geordie, but I'm happy to be Geordie.
He used to be Geordie.
Right. Right. Like a jaded Geordie now. And the last one we have to mention is, you haven't mentioned Dr. Crusher on here, Nate, but Troy, who is the ship's counsellor. It's a bit, that in itself is a big deal. The ship has a counsellor now. She actually sits on the bridge next to the captain.
Yeah.
I've always thought it's a bit of a weird thing, a ship's counselor, but it's this whole, it enables them to tell more emotional stories, and it's much more, it's very quite progressive ideas of like wellness and around psychology, which obviously we're changing. But her thing is she's an empath. She's half Beta Z or Betazoid.
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly how she's from Beta Z. She's a Betazoid, and they can. She's only half, so she can just sense emotions. She's empathic, but like literally, not like when people say I'm an empath. Like she literally is an empath, and she sits on the bridge and goes like, "I'm feeling a great sense of sadness."
Or sometimes they'll be looking at the view screen and she'll be like, "He's lying."
Yeah,
and then they'll know that the enemy is lying.
But I think she starts out a bit rubbish like that. Everything we just said is a bit rubbish, but actually is a really important part of the crew, and they figure out what she is, as in the writers later on as they do.
I
with
think
all
we've
of them.
prepped Rob brilliantly for the next film, and before he falls asleep,
Yes, he looks ready for a sleep.
my final fact is that Troy's character was very much like is it Ilya, the bald lady from
Yes.
Again, that's where the primordial super fat character.
And it's probably worth saying, because you're going to watch some movies with these characters in, that she has a kind of on again, off again sort of relationship with Riker, or they've got like a history together.
Yeah.
At least at the beginning of these movies. So,
and for all of that progressiveness, the last episode of the Next Generation I saw was where a hot guy comes to do some negotiations on the Enterprise, and Troy starts dating him, and it's all kind of from her point of view, and it's written by a woman as well, which is like just terrible for the TV industry as a whole, and like ends up doing like space yoga with Dr. Crusher. They're just like gals just talking about this hot guy. It was the worst episode that I've seen of the ones that I've been going through.
So look forward to that.
Excellent.
So there you go, Rob.
3.
You've been prepared now for the Next
Been
Generation
indoctrinated.
cast.
Resistance is futile, Rob.
I am going to. Well, Nath has picked 3 episodes for you to watch if you have the time, and I am going to try and find some time over the next couple of days to watch them too. So maybe we can watch them together. But
I guarantee you will enjoy watching them more than you've enjoyed listening to us talk about them.
Yeah. Which probably still doesn't sound like very good. But we're done with the Next Generation now. But we're not done with this episode, because the last thing we wanted to do is listener mailbag. So if you've made it right to the end of any of our episodes, you will have heard that we have a Gmail address where you can send us questions, comments, thoughts, whatever you like. It's redshirtcinemaclub@gmail.com. So if you're listening, if you didn't know that, now you know. Please do send us some emails. And we've had some.
Yes.
Nath's picked a few out for us to read.
Yeah, I'll read this first one. It's from Mark Davies via email. First of all, he says, "Do you think your podcast will generate such significant uptake in views of the original movies it will earn you a spot on the convention circuit?" To which the answer is no. But second part of that question is also, can we get another Bridge Cruise stream with you all in respective original cast characters of Kirk, Spock and Bones? The reference to Bridge Crew just being that's something we played on the YouTube channel that we make together, but also I just wanted to say, out of Kirk, Spock and Bones, I wanted to use this to kick off an argument as to who is who.
Yeah, that's a good question, isn't it? I don't think I'm going to enjoy this conversation.
Maybe we should let Rob decide, as Rob is learning about these characters.
Yeah.
And we will just have to agree with whatever you say.
I'm not sure we fit those 3. I don't think,
I was trying to think
I don't
about,
think there's a neat fit there, really.
I could see you as a Spock, I got to say.
You're like half Spock and half Bones, I think.
Yeah. Well, then
That's unhelpful for this, though.
It is.
I don't think either of us. Obviously, Dave and I would both like to be Kirk. As Dave pointed out, he's more of a Geordie, and I would say the thing about Kirk is he's basically quite good-natured, and I would say that there is there is a more unpleasant and competitive side to me, which I don't think fits into Kirk either. So
you don't think he's competitive?
Not in the toxic way that I can be. No,
I don't know. He cheated on the Kobayashi Maru.
So what
That's a very logical thing
I,
for you to say, Nathan. Maybe you're Spock and Dave is Kirk and I'm Bones.
Dave's a Geordie, I think, which is brilliant. I'd love to be a Geordie.
Well, if we have to assign ourselves the main 3, the original 3,
Yeah.
I don't think it's a perfect fit, but that's what I would go for.
So just one more time, who is who?
You're Kirk, Dave is Kirk,
Yes.
Nath is Spock, and I am Bones.
Interesting.
Absolutely no chance.
I think we're all 3 of them
Dave's
at different times
Dave's
of the
not a
day.
rule breaker. That's the problem. He's not Doesn't have that swagger.
Yes, I am. I broke the rules earlier when I gave you a field demotion. No one saw that coming. Respect me. And would we ever play some more Bridge Crew? Honestly, I would play it in my own time, any time, if you guys fancied it. I can't see us ever doing it on the internet again, but I do wonder whether it would change your experience now, Rob.
I'd be interested to see it and understand. Because when we played it before, I just sat there doing whatever you told me to do.
Yes, that's right. I am Kirk.
What the heck's a Kobayashi Maru? Blah, blah, blah. I don't know.
Yeah. Phases to
go warp speed 3, whatever
Yeah.
you said. So yeah, it'd be more interesting now knowing a little bit more about Star Trek to experience that, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
Second question was from Matthew Reynolds via email. I cannot fathom how Rob preferred Star Trek the Motion Picture to Wrath of Khan. This does not bode well for Rob becoming a fan. Fingers crossed for the next generation. But the part which becomes a question is, have you explained the even/odd, good, bad movie theory to Rob? Which is what I referenced earlier before my ranking.
Which is basically, I mean, it's pretty straightforward, is that the odd-numbered movies are bad and the even-numbered movies are good.
We tried to get away from it, Dave, but we couldn't.
Yeah, it's funny because before doing this, I would have just said, yeah, definitely. Now doing it, even though I ranked the 3 odd-numbered movies as the worst, I don't think that they're bad. I maybe Search for Spock, even though I didn't put that last, is actually just quite bad. But I think
Five gets a bad rap.
Final Frontier gets a bad rap. That's the one where I'm like, I don't think I agree with that as a thing, as a theory.
What did you know about this, Rob?
I had heard of it. I can't remember where I'd heard of it.
Yeah.
I also got a sense before we watched each film whether or not you liked the films we were about to watch.
Yeah.
Just I could feel it.
Yeah. Should have tried harder to hide that, but it's hard.
Yeah, at least you don't know what we think about the next generation.
We have, according to the points we've assigned all of these films, the odd-numbered movies have scored 7, 6, and 6, and the even-numbered movies have scored 14, 14, and 16. So there is quite a discrepancy there.
Yeah.
Maybe it's true.
It is true. They are the better movies.
What does that mean for the next film we're going to watch?
Well, yes, that's right. Does this trend continue? That's something we'll
I
have
hope
to
not.
talk about.
Wow.
Well, at least it means there will be some good movies if it does. The next question we had was from Sean Nolan, and it came via email specifically after we'd watched The Wrath of Khan, after that episode. Why is Spock such an iconic and loved character? He's literally zero fun. So far in the movies, he's been a dull, straight-faced character that people for some reason are fond of. I know that the next movie is The Search for Spock, but why bother? I say leave him there. What do you think about that?
Sean Nolan. The reason I put that one in is because that was basically your reaction after we watched Khan. You were kind of like, Spock's rubbish.
What do you think?
I think that is someone deliberately trying to be contrary.
Do you think
and
so?
stir up trouble.
They've only watched 2 movies, and to be fair, at that point,
Is that the only 2 films they've watched?
well, that's when they sent their email, so we have to assume so.
Okay.
It's true, right? I mean, Spock. When did you get? Do you think there was a moment that
It's
you
like there's
had
a
an affinity?
gravitas and a charisma to Spock. There's he's a different type of character to Kirk, but as soon as he walked on the bridge in the very first movie, just everyone's reaction around him, he's a magnetic character.
Yeah.
And Kirk's right at the end of Khan when Spock dies. And I think Kirk says something along the lines of all the souls I've encountered on my journeys, his was the most human. And he's obviously half human, he's half Vulcan. I think Spock sometimes isn't aware of the humanity that sometimes bleeds through into him.
Yeah.
So what was the question? Why would you bother?
It was just like, why is Spock such a beloved character? I think he's clear why he's an iconic character.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I guess if you've watched
after those
2
2
movies,
you would be like, I don't get it. I think that's fair. Like, he doesn't really. I think his certainly in Voyage Home and Undiscovered Country, you get to see a much more of Spock.
Yeah,
much more.
It's hard to really. Even I, who have not seen any Star Trek, after I watched their first 2 movies, I still know about Spock. So I guess it's hard to really imagine what it would be like for someone to watch those first 2 movies, knowing literally nothing about Spock.
Yeah.
Like, he's such a pop culture.
That's true.
He's so ubiquitous. Like, everyone knows Spock.
Yeah. And, there is the whole of the original series with loads of Spock in it. And anyway, at this point, having watched 6 movies, I love Spock. So there. We also had a message from Kazashani on Twitter. Nath, this is for you and I. Dave and Nath, is there a particular moment in the films or shows that made you a Star Trek fan? And honestly, it was whenever the BBC Two commissioner decided to put Star Trek The Next Generation on at 6 o'clock on a weekday.
Yeah.
I think it was a Wednesday specifically.
It was, yeah.
Because here in the UK, children's television, when I was growing up at least, stopped at 5:30. No. Yes, then it was Neighbours.
Yeah, 5:30.
And then at 6, it was the 6 o'clock news. And obviously, as a kid, that is the most boring thing in the world. So I would turn over and... that's how I came into contact with the Next Generation. As much as anything to begin with, it was just an alternative to the news. But I did fall in love with it. And honestly, I think really that I would put the Borg down as a thing that properly got its hooks in me. Again, it was that scary but fascinating kind of thing. I thought they were just... Any episode that had the Borg in was just like the coolest episode, and I couldn't wait to see them.
I'm in much the same boat as you, and I've already talked about Locutus. I think that was a cliffhanger between seasons. Although I think by the time they came to Britain, it was the next week. But in the States, imagine having to wait 6 months to like, oh my God, they assimilated Captain Picard.
Yeah.
But that moment is one I remember. Not a few years later. A-level time, going around to a friend's house who was like living on his own at that point, and he had he was a massive Star Trek fan, and he had like a picture of the Borg, and we were talking, like a late night post club conversation, but it was about Locutus.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it was looming large in my life then. So I say, the Borg. I also say the Borg.
I remember that post Neighbours 6 p.m. slot having 1960s Adam West Batman in it when I was a kid.
Interesting.
Nice,
there was also
it's on different days.
There was also, I think it was actually The Simpsons was at 6, and then it was after that there would be a rotation. Sometimes it was Quantum Leap, something else I love.
Well, so I looked up when they got shown.
Ren and Stimpy,
just this weekend, because I couldn't remember, and so they started in 1990, and I think for 2 years they showed The Next Generation up to where it got to in the States, and then they took it off. And then they put the original series back on for 2 years, lasted for roughly 2 years. And then they started the run again from the beginning. So this would be about 94. They started all of The Next Generation and just played it out until it ended. And at the same time, but like as they went through that run, then DS9 and Voyager came on into the same slot as well. So that second part is probably where I saw most of it.
So. Same. And I remember the series ending and having no idea that it was, because it already happened elsewhere and there wasn't the internet. I didn't really have anyone to talk to about Star Trek growing up because I felt certain I'd be bullied.
Imagine that though. Imagine like this is why these sort of questions cling on long in the mind. Like, oh, whatever happened to, what was the end of, and you can find all these answers. There's no mystery or excitement about it now. But back then it's like, oh, I've missed that. Yeah. I have to buy a magazine or like, I don't even know, where I would ask my friend James Allen, I guess, who had a picture of the Borg on his wall.
It was a different time. Last question then. One for you, Rob, and it's quite a big one. Marion on Twitter said, Rob, if the roles were reversed, what franchise would you pick for this format? Which I suppose suggests something that either Nath or I haven't seen, ideally, but just, what would you pick?
Well, there aren't movies here, but I think I've said this before. Knowing how much you love Star Trek, I feel convinced that you would love quite a lot of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
There's so many terrifying alien races in Doctor Who that I would love to introduce you to. I'd love to show you particular episodes and arcs of Doctor Who that I remember quite fondly. I'd love to show you episodes with the Weeping Angels in, with the silence in. There are some
You've never seen any Doctor Who?
Great episodes. So good.
No, I've never seen any Doctor Who.
Sometimes it's terrible. Sometimes it's better than anything else on TV.
I think I might have, to be fair, I think I might have seen one episode with the Daleks, or like, was there like a kind of a movie, like a 70s-ish kind of long episode?
There was
with
a
the
movie
Daleks?
in 1996 when they attempted to revive it for the first time. Because I think the original run ended in 1986, I want to say. And they tried to revive it in 1996 with this movie.
Who starred in the movie?
I
Who's the
can't
Doctor?
remember the actor.
A McGann brother.
Paul McGann.
Yeah.
Paul McGann.
There's a movie from the 60s called Doctor Who and the Dalek.
Oh, is there?
And it
Oh, I
has...
didn't realise.
I've seen that.
Peter Cushing.
Right, yes, I've seen that
Yeah.
one. I don't remember much about it, but apart from I liked the Daleks and they were quite scary.
Well, the Daleks aren't even in my top 5 coolest Doctor Who enemies.
Yeah.
Oh,
well,
there's
I
so
must
much good
admit,
stuff.
in episode 1 of this podcast where you talked about
Midnight.
that,
The Midnight Entity.
That I
Oh,
was
amazing.
fascinated just hearing you tell me about that.
You could
And
watch that episode without knowing anything else about Doctor Who.
I think I
it'd be
will,
good.
although you actually did make it sound a little bit scary.
It's not that scary,
no.
but it's sort of like just chills you a little bit.
Yeah, I would definitely watch it. Well, who knows? I mean, anything is on the cards, and we're definitely, I think it's fair to say we've been having a really good time making this podcast, or at least I can say that I've been having a really good time making it, and slowly we're seeing it grow, and the audience seem to be enjoying it as well. And we have definitely been thinking about whether we might continue it and what we might do next, and it would definitely be something we're thinking about and talking about. And again, if you have some ideas, why not send them in to the email address?
Yeah, I was going to say I've been more checking over the email address than I think either of you. We've had some really, really lovely feedback and correspondence, and just to say, please, it really helps us to just to make it better and to know what everybody's enjoying. So please write in.
You've just revealed yourself as a highly trained tribble there, Nath.
Yeah, I know.
So
that's who I actually am.
What's a
He's not
tribble?
Kirk. Oh God, yeah, we've opened a whole can of worms. Well, that's it. We've reached the end of this bonus episode. Rob, I'm going to implore you to try and watch some The Next Generation, or at least just tell me that you will. Before we get on to the next movie, and for the first time, you will, well, unless you watch these episodes, you'll meet the cast of The Next Generation, who are going to be with us for a few films more.
I'm looking forward to it.
We can't really ask you if you're a Star Trek fan this episode, but I will ask you, do you think it's still on the cards for you to be a Star Trek fan?
I think it's on the cards.
I'll take that. You've been listening to Redshirt Cinema Club. If you've enjoyed listening, rating and reviewing the podcast would really help us out. We'll be back next Monday with another episode, and in the meantime, we'd love to hear from you. Send us an email to redshirtcinemaclub@gmail.com, where a team of highly trained tribbles await your correspondence. See you next week.